It worked.
Cool.
Alrighty. Tweet's been tweeted.
Cool.
So, welcome in everyone to the Bat Flip podcast. I am going to be your host, David. Joining me tonight is Matt. Damien is out tonight. So, Matt, how are you doing before we get started tonight?
Doing okay. It's been a kind of crazy weekend. I didn't. It wasn't the best weekend, but there were some cool things. I got to see the Northern Lights from Alabama on Friday night. That was really
Mhm.
cool. And I tried to go see it on Saturday as well, but on Saturday they ended up not being as strong as I actually made an effort to go see them somewhere where I was kind of away from the city on Saturday, and they weren't quite as the effect wasn't quite as strong, so we couldn't really see them here. But it was kind of a bummer. But yeah, and then my truck broke down yesterday, so that's always not fun. But
Uh,
but yeah, we got there's some good sports going on. I've been enjoying that. Hope everyone had a happy Mother's Day. I guess we probably don't have that many mothers listening to us, they but to
oh,
everyone,
hey.
hope everyone's you know got their mother something really good. So and spent the day, and that was good. I spent the day with my mom and my grandmother, so that was cool. But anyways, yeah. How are you doing, David? It's been a couple weeks. I'm glad that you got your move knocked out. How's that going?
Oh, we're in a new place, new internet. A little bit better, hopefully. I know of at least one mother that listens, and that would be my mother. So
Well, there
happy
you
Mother's
go.
Day to mom. But she says, "Oh, I listen to my son talk about baseball," and I always appreciate that. And that just means we have at least one listener. But it was it was a busy weekend. Last week was super busy. I think at this time last week we were 3/4 of the way moved out loading the truck. So like it was a rough one. We're Monday night right now about 7 o'clock Central Time. So it was yeah it was a late night last Monday night, but got it all done. We're back. I'm excited. The place is awesome. So hopefully it all goes well and we're able to get into some baseball talk here. And we'll start with kind of a mid-May injury update is where I want to begin. And as a Cubs fan, the Cubs have been decimated by injuries, and we won't cover all of them. But today, Adbert Alzolay was placed on the 15-day IL. Um, on top of that, the Cubs have also lost Dansby Swanson last week to the 15-day IL as well. So, Matt, I think I can talk about the Cubs a little bit, but Adbert Alzolay was the single worst relief pitcher by wins above replacement in baseball to this point. Um, I think this is a positive outcome for the Cubs, is it not?
I mean, I'm curious that because I didn't even know he was in on the IL. Was his injury an injury or a
Elbow.
strained ability to play baseball?
Well,
Or is
I
it or
thought
is
it
it a real?
was. I think it's a real elbow injury, and I
Okay, well
think
that's a
he may
bummer
be done
then.
for the year. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like to hear that, but it's sometimes when a player's struggling as badly as he is, they get a they get that phantom IL to try to get them right, give them some time off, see if they can kind of rework some things. But this, unfortunately, it sounds like that's not the case with this one. And on Dansby, I mean, you can probably speak more to it, but I looked at his numbers the other day when I saw him go in the IL, and it looked like he had struggled a bit, at the plate especially. And his defense wasn't a struggle, but he was down a little bit from like he's been one of the best defensive shortstops in baseball for the last 2 years, and this year he's been a good defensive shortstop, but he hasn't been anywhere near the same
Well,
level. So I'm assuming that that's probably at least somewhat injury related. So I don't know exactly what his injury was. I do know that Dansby Swanson, from his time with the Braves, he a lot of times would not. He's one of those guys that, and the Braves have had several of them. It's been part of the culture where they just do not take days off ever. They refuse to
Yep.
come out of games and take days off. So this might be one of those things where he might have tried to play through something for a little while. But you can probably speak more to those than me.
He so the thing about Dansby, and we'll touch on it before we move on. He already had 4 errors this season, which was very uncharacteristic for him. He only had 11 all of last year. He had 8 in all of 2022. Errors not the best way to determine fielding. The fielding impact. It's not always on the fielder, whatever. But Dansby was a little more sloppy this season for sure. And then on top of that, got hurt and did try to play through it a little bit. I think it only really dropped his fielding. And the Cubs finally do make him take some days off, which is good. But because last year down the stretch he did not take any days off, and he slumped right at the end of the season, and it hurt the Cubs going down the stretch. But the Cubs have been, I think, the most injury impacted team in baseball. They've lost, I think, 6, 7 starters off of their entire roster. Luckily, I don't know if you remember, there's a Fangraphs depth chart thing that stated that there's certain teams that can withstand that a little bit, just based on their depth. Nico Horner slides over to shortstop, right? They've got Nick Madrigal and Miles Mastroboni sitting on the roster right now, who can just step in at second base. Like the team doesn't really change, the way they've constructed things. So I think the Cubs are still in a good spot miraculously because they did get a bunch of their guys back finally, but a bunch more injuries to be sure, and that's very very wild given how much it's impacted them so far, and the fact that they're still got like 24 wins. They've actually been pretty decent this year.
Yeah, for sure. They've. I mean, it's unfortunate to see the injury. I mean,
Yeah.
um, so I was a little distracted there. I have the
Yeah.
game on in the background, and Craig Counsell just got tossed. So,
That's right.
but were
That's
you talking about
right.
Riley?
Yes,
Okay,
we'll move
sorry.
within the game on here. We'll move within
I'm
the game
not gonna
on
turn it
to.
off. I promise.
No, do not
Um,
turn it off. Do not turn it off. It's fine. Austin Riley also went down this week,
yes.
and he should be back probably during the series, but it looks kind of like he's on one of those
Yeah.
things where it's he's just day to day, and they keep benching him, which
Yeah.
isn't the best use of a roster spot.
Yeah. He's It's the thing with the thing that frustrates me sometimes with this. We were just talking about this with Dansby Swanson. The thing that frustrates me sometimes with the Braves is even if a guy's not if it's playing through an injury, they don't say anything. Like it's kind of just part of the way that they are. And I'm pretty sure Austin Riley was. I'm pretty sure he was injured in batting practice. They said he felt something during batting practice, and he had even the ESPN announcer last night during the game said that if they watched him take batting practice, they thought he looked like he was kind of had a couple awkward swings where he looked kind of funny. So, but the Braves didn't. He didn't tell anybody that he was hurting, so he stayed in the game. And it sounds like he probably avoided a major injury because of because it sounded precautionary. Just kind of the comments they've made, but it's one of those things where he could have gotten. I mean, especially if it's like a tight oblique or something, he could have gotten out for 2 months. I mean, Sean Murphy's already out for 2 months with the same thing. So that the Braves really need to be more open about potential injuries. But he it sucks to see him get hurt. I mean, he's a guy that you know I think that the Braves acquired Zach Short last week, who he's kind of a fine utility guy, and I feel more comfortable with him playing third base than Luis Guillorme, who probably would have been the option there. So I mean, if it's just a day or two, I'm fine with that. And with the roster spot, I mean, I think the Braves are going to do some imaging on Riley. I think they said they were going to do an MRI with him tonight to make sure there's nothing off, and they'll figure that out when they get to it. The big problem is that they can't afford injuries because they just don't have much depth. The minor leagues have been a little bit, the minor leagues have been kind of decimated by trades and graduation, and they just don't have that
Mhm.
much at AAA that they can call upon to replace somebody at a replacement level. I mean, and maybe Zach Short can do that. David Fletcher's probably the other option that could play third base, and I don't know that he would be more than a replacement level player. And you're talking about Austin Riley's a guy who was getting MVP consideration preseason, and he hasn't had a fantastic offensive season so far, but he's a really good player, and losing that is a big deal. So we'll see if he's able to. We'll see if he's able to come back in the next day or two. But this could be something we have to talk more about as we go forward. And if it's an oblique, then he could be out for a while. So,
Hmm.
but we'll see. Hopefully, it's nothing big.
Let's go to the San Francisco Giants with Jung-Hoo Lee, who separated his shoulder jumping into the outfield wall, trying to make what would have been a near home run robbing catch
Yeah.
on Sunday. Looks like Lee will be out for a little while, and that will lead a little bit later into our best and worst free agent pickups. We're not going to touch on Jung-Hoo Lee, but he's been pretty good, I think, all things considered, for the San Francisco Giants, and this is kind of a loss for them.
Yeah, it's a big loss for them. The Giants ended up not being able to pull one of the big free agents over the last few years, so they signed a bunch of them, a bunch of good instead of the big time, the number one free agent type guys. They signed a bunch of guys who were kind of in that upper middle tier. And Jung Hoo Lee is one of them, and Jung Hoo Lee is the one that got the biggest contract. So it sucks to see him. He was kind of adjusting to the big league game. He was looking decent. Um, you know, he he's that type of guy he's gonna make a lot of contact and get on base, but the power is not really gonna be there. Then the defense is really good with him, and he it always sucks. I hate injuries. They suck. It really sucks when somebody's trying to make a spectacular play and going all out and playing hard, and that's when they get hurt. You know, because and I hate when that happens. But hopefully he comes back soon. Separated shoulders can be tricky. I mean, we've seen this before. Like sometimes guys end up being totally fine and come back pretty quick, and then sometimes you end up with like a Cody Bellinger who goes from an MVP to being awful for 2 years and getting non-tendered. And seems like he's close to. He's still not the MVP level he was at, but he's good again. But it's like the separated shoulders can derail careers for multiple years, but at the same time, sometimes they don't. So hopefully it ends up. Hopefully there's no like structural, like rotator cuff injury or labrum or anything like that involved in it as well. Hopefully
Mhm.
it's something that he can recover from pretty quick. But I would imagine he'd be out for a while, and that's a big hit to a Giants team that's kind of struggled.
Yeah, they have not been good, and Lee was I think under 100 WRC plus, but he's kind of functioning as that leadoff hitter for them, and that was kind of important. Um, we'll stay on the West Coast here for a couple more teams. Joe Kelly also has gone on the IL for the Dodgers. That bullpen is looking a little thin, and it seems to be, I think, the one weak spot on a very strong Dodgers team.
Yeah, yeah, Joe Kelly going on the IL is not good for them. They already have Evan Phillips on the IL. So losing Joe Kelly is not great. I think he had been, so far he's been kind of he's been all right. He's actually been really good. His ERA is up there, but his FIP is really good. And he's kind of been Joe Kelly. He's walked some guys, but getting a lot of strikeouts. He's been solid, and we'll see if he's able to come back pretty quick. I'm not even sure exactly what his injury was, but hopefully he's able to come back pretty quick.
Yep, and I think it's just a shoulder injury for Joe Kelly, but
Yeah, that's not
those are
good.
risky. Yeah,
Yep.
those are not great to hear about from pitchers. But additionally, Brian Woo's got a shoulder injury for the Mariners. Came out of the game yesterday. We still don't know what that injury is, but it comes on the heels of Matt Brash being announced that he's getting Tommy John. So two of the young star Mariners relievers slash starters injured in terms of pitching, and two more guys who throw really hard in Brash and Wu. So the arm injury is really continuing to play a factor in baseball early in the season.
Yeah, and this is one that Brian Wu had a delayed start to the season. I believe it might have been an elbow at the end of spring training.
Yeah.
So that's one of the times I think it's a good thing if it's a shoulder because it's not the elbow issue reoccurring,
Hmm.
which I think there was concern about that elbow maybe being like a Tommy John type thing when it happened. So that's probably good news that hadn't recurred, but it's a bummer. Guy works real hard to get back. Rehabs and then first start of the year he's out again. So hopefully he comes back. You know somewhat soon, but we'll see. I don't think the severity of that one's been put out there that much. And Matt Brash, I think we kind of already knew this was a possibility. He had been
Hmm.
he was shut down in the spring with I don't think they announced he was going to have Tommy John, but they just said he had an elbow issue. So we kind of assumed this might be coming. And he's another one of those guys that just has that like super fast arm speed. Um, he's not really this like behemoth of a human being. We'll talk about one of those here in a minute. But Matt Brash is the type of guy. He's 6'1", 173, and he's throwing 100 miles an hour. That's typically not a good recipe for longevity. So I'm not too surprised, even though it really is a bummer because last year this guy broke out as a reliever,
Hmm.
which is kind of one of the things that we always said was that he doesn't need to be starting. He needs to be relieving because he walks too many guys. But when you put him in the bullpen, his stuff plays up and he's filthy. So, and that's what he was last year. But, it's going to have Tommy John, so he'll be out for, I'm not sure if it's the brace or not, but he'll be out for this year and probably the start of next year. So, hopefully his recovery goes well, and we wish him the best.
Yep. So that's kind of our injury report. We'll parlay the injury report in with some more player, updates. Paul Skenes, the number one pitching prospect in baseball, did debut this weekend against the Cubs on I think Saturday, and he pitched 5 innings. He seemed pretty strong. Let some guys on base at the end of his appearance, and they wound up coming home, thanks to the Pirates. And I think the Pirates wound up losing the game that Skeens. Man, I can't remember. The Cubs won 2 games this weekend, but I don't think they won Skeens' debut. I think Skeens won the debut, 5 home runs from the Pirates actually. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that was a crazy back and forth game that had a rain delay in the middle of it, right?
yep, it did.
Yeah, so that was pretty crazy. But yeah, I mean, Paul Skeens, we've talked about him some already. I mean, the stuff is electric. Um, I, I think that we've talked a lot about these guys throwing super hard with the injury issues. But this is the type of guy that I think might be able to be more. It might be more sustainable for him because
Hmm.
he's just a behemoth of a human being. Like I mentioned, a lot of these guys that are having the major issues from injury and durability, who are that those hard throwers that everyone's been talking about. Why you can't throw 100 miles. Most of those guys are guys like Matt Brash or Spencer Strider or somebody who's 6 foot tall, 100 under sub 200 pounds. They're not super like this guy is built to throw 100 miles an hour. He's 6'6". There's been guys in the past. Randy Johnson was built to throw 100 miles an hour.
Hmm.
Like you've got like Nolan Ryan was built to throw 100 miles an hour. There's some guys who have been extremely durable throwing that hard, and I do think that Paul Skeens could be one of those types. And in fact, Garrett Cole is a very good comparison with a Pirate who he's just built to throw hard. He's built to be a durable workhorse and of course that he's a little bit ironic because he's out right now, but he's been in the big leagues for like 8 years. Has never gone to the IL. So until this year. So, and it's not even a, like a ligament or a structural thing. It's like a nerve thing. So, um, anyways, it's just pretty, it's going to be interesting to see how Skeens works out.
Hmm.
His stuff is incredible. I know that he's been working on that changeup and getting it to the same quality as his other pitches, which it sounds like the reports on it have been really good. And then just it'll be interesting to see how the Pirates manage him with his. They've been limiting Jared Jones a good bit, but man, there are two things with this, and I want you to answer. Jared Jones and Paul Skeens, where does this rank on the best two stuff wise, the two best pitchers, young pitchers, rookie pitchers that we've seen? And also, like, where does Paul Skeens, like, where does this debut kind of rank as in like the hype around it stuff? I mean, it feels a little bit like the Strasburg debut where it's just like everyone's just tuned in to see Strasburg pitch. And he's like, and now of course the actual game he pitched wasn't the Strasburg 14 strikeout debut or whatever it was,
Yeah.
but there's a couple of things that I did want to ask you about.
I mean, it's significantly. Well, I think Skeens wasn't as good as a Strasburg. Right? I don't think that
I don't either.
the hype was quite there for what that ended up being. Right? He ended up giving he only went 4 innings. Left with some guys on base that came around to score. Right? He gave up a home run. It's he had a good start, right? It's a good first start. His stuff was clearly there, but he's also clearly a 22-year-old who's not maybe an ace product yet. I am going to think that Paul Skenes is going to feel a little like Grayson Rodriguez to start here, where Grayson had a lot of tantalizing stuff, had risen into the top 10 prospect lists because he was pitching for Baltimore and wasn't that high of a draft prospect. He didn't quite have that same like pop that Skenes has. Skenes is very much a popular pick because he went first overall. Um, but there's going to be early struggles, I think, when it comes to Paul Skenes. Think he'll get in trouble with walking guys with a little bit of that control just because his stuff is so nasty. He's going to have to figure out how to rein it in. Obviously, in terms of a debut with him and Jones, I think the Pirates have a really good little starting pitching core. I think those guys have got to figure out whether or not they're going to compete soon to stack some help around them because they probably need to invest in the fielding behind the bullpen behind them, right? I mean, the Pirates obviously let the runs come right in for Paul Skenes. They didn't really keep that ERA down by throwing in a pitcher who couldn't walk it, who couldn't throw strikes and walk the bases loaded and then walk 2 guys in. So the Pirates have to invest in these guys. They have to invest in the team around these guys because they're so talented. If that's not going to happen, then you would worry whether Skenes and a Jones is going to develop into the ace that you think they can be. So at least that's my thought.
Yeah.
It's I'm obviously he was going against my team. The team lost the game. Like it was a frustrating result, but like the Paul Skenes part that we wanted to see definitely shows up, right?
Oh
Fast
yeah.
pitches, 94-mile-an-hour splitter or something like that. Like it's Paul Skenes is going to be a star pitcher
Yeah.
in this league, I think, but you know, the Pirates have to act like a team that has a star pitcher and give him some help, especially in that bullpen.
Yeah. Yeah. To be fair, I mean the Pirates have tried to add to that bullpen. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
mean they did sign Aroldis Chapman in the offseason, who was pretty good last year. Like they've done a few things, but I agree. Like they've got to get this upcoming offseason is the time to invest. You've got
Mm-hmm.
two young starting pitchers who are currently like on top of their game. You've got a couple other guys who are, like Merrill Kelly, who are solid and established big leaguers too. And your offense has some interesting young talent, but they're probably still a couple bats away. Like this is the offseason for them to put a little bit, and they don't even have to put a huge payroll out there because they
Mm-hmm.
do have so much cost controlled young guy. It reminds me a little bit of like when the Royals were, when the Royals went on their run with a couple World Series, like they were able to sign some free agents for a couple years there because everyone else was so cost controlled that they could sign like they signed a James Shields and they signed or traded for James Shields who had a pretty big contract or Cueto and they traded for him and they signed Edinson Volquez and they signed like they signed Alex Rios even though that one didn't go super well. Like they had they made these moves. So um that that's definitely something to look out for with the Pirates. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
them and then a few other teams that are in a similar spot. Like the Reds are probably in that spot too. This past offseason was the time for the Reds to do it, I think. But
Yeah.
um, and then of course they did a little bit. I mean, they added what 4 free agents. I mean, and a couple of them being fairly, they didn't add like Cody Bellinger or Otani or Yamamoto or somebody, but they added like not they didn't add like 1 year deals.
Mm-hmm.
They added like Candelario is a 3 year contract and stuff. So, but yeah, the Pirates I agree 100%. They do need to add to these guys.
Well, I'm gonna shift on us a little bit. Let's go since you talked about free agency. Let's go into the best and worst free agents of the last offseason. And as we look back on this free agent class, it's kind of looking like a pretty mediocre free agent class, other than the top names, right? I mean, Otani obviously has been performing like a guy who's getting paid $700 million. We're not going to talk about that guy, right? Yamamoto has pitched really well since his first start, which was in Japan,
It's
Korea,
Korea, yeah.
Korea, which had discomfort written all over it. throw that one out the window. I mean, it happened once you get enough of a sample. I think Yamamoto is very clearly a good pitcher. Um, let's talk about some of these other guys that did sign, and we'll start with the negatives so we can end on the positives. With I think we'll start with all three of the Scott Boris trio that signed super late into the spring training. It was Jordan Montgomery, Blake Snell, Matt Chapman. All three signed kind of short-term deals after waiting out bigger deals. We know for a fact Blake Snell turned down a bigger deal from the Yankees. And then from all reports, Jordan Montgomery was being kind of shopped by Boris to prop up Blake Snell. And Montgomery has since fired Scott Boras, but he has come off to a dreadful start with the Diamondbacks. Blake Snell not pitching well and injured for the Giants, and then Matt Chapman it has started off very, very slow for the Giants as well. Um, for these three, Matt, I mean, is this is kind of what we thought was going to happen, right? I mean, when you don't get a spring training and you come out, you come into the season really late with all these seeming demands. I don't think that the chemistry is built. I don't think a lot of the things that you typically expect from players get brought to the forefront there in the when you have a situation like this.
Yeah, and especially with pitchers, you look at. I thought that there was a chance that the position players could be fine, and of course, the other guy that signed late, even though it wasn't as late as these guys, Cody Bellinger's been fine, so it hadn't
Mhm.
really affected him too much. So like, the pitching thing, it is totally different to come out and throw in a to pitch in a pitch in real games, even if they're spring training games, than it is to throw bullpens at Boris's place. Like, and until you get built up, and I mean, you can say you built up all you want to, but that adrenaline of being in a game facing real hitters, not guys who are just kind of standing in the box, like it's a real thing. So, Jordan Montgomery and Blake Snell, they just kind of went straight into the fire, and it's one of those things that like the it's they should have seen this coming, and this is why you don't wait until the
Mhm.
freaking last minute to sign your contract. Like, they should have seen it coming. All this is going to do is cost them money in the long run, because they could have taken that other deal. Like, you're going to have a bad year when you don't pitch until the season starts. Like, you try to build up. I mean, Jordan Montgomery was building up in the minor leagues for the season. Like, it's just not going to work well. So, um, you know, uh, it's been a disaster for them. Blake Snell's got an 11 ERA, and he's on the IL now, which might be related to not being built
Mhm.
up and trying to pitch anyways. And then Jordan Montgomery, he's only pitched in 4 games. He started late. I believe you said he was on the IL now. And he's got a 4.70 ERA, which isn't a total disaster, but he's got 10 strikeouts in 23 innings. His strikeout rate's like under 4 strikeouts per 9. It's
Yeah.
remarkable, how low he's got a. It's just it's been really, really, really rough for these two guys. And then you mentioned Matt Chapman, and I think Matt Chapman's a little bit different because there's red flags with his game, and there have been. I mean, his chase rates have been bad. He whiffs a ton in the zone. Like, there's a lot of issues with Matt Chapman's game in general. And I mean, you look at this year, and I mean, the strikeout rate's fine, but the walk rate's way down. I mean, he still hits the ball pretty hard, but he's hitting it on the ground a lot. Like, I mean, his opposite, he's not pulling the ball as much. It's just, his BABIP's been a little bit unlucky, but at the same time, like, there's just issues with him at the plate, and a lot of I think he gets a lot of the metrics, statcast metrics always like him. But this year they really haven't as much, except for just the exit velocity part of it. Like, he's not barreling the ball very well this year, so it's one of those things. I I don't know that his is totally related to not being. I think his might be as related to being just not quite being the same guy as he
Mhm.
was back with his first couple years with Oakland, when he was an MVP candidate, to where he is now. I think he's just not the same guy. So I didn't especially like the process of those signings either. I'd liked the Jordan Montgomery one because it is a true 1 year deal. But the other two, I mean, your downside is you're stuck with a $18 million a year contract for 3 years, and that's what they're stuck with because these guys are going to opt in, and if they don't just suddenly turn it around, it's like you just added a bad contract for 3 years when the upside of these players isn't the same thing. That I mean, I know Blake Snell won the Cy Young last year, but it's like there's red flags with their games. So, and that's kind of the way this whole market worked, where these guys had a lot of success last year, but there's red flags with their games, and it's going to make people hesitant. That's why we were in this to start with. But
Yeah.
those three have been pretty rough signings.
Yeah, and I would argue that building chemistry in spring training is maybe and in camp before spring training is maybe the most important factor, especially when it comes to pitchers working with catchers, right? And understanding your catchers, understanding how they're going to set up for framing, getting a comfort level with their game calling and all of that. There's certainly a repertoire that needs to be developed, right? And that's not going to be shown on these, a statcast page or a fangraphs page. But that's very clearly apparent when you look at these three guys changed teams, right? And held out. They were looking for more money. Everybody knows that. So there's obviously a little resentment because those guys were like, well, this isn't my number one choice, but I ended up here, right? I think they've built a little resentment to the team because it's like this is the best you can do, and then the players are not nearly as receptive because they've been, they were signed on, they were at camp on time, and then this guy comes waltzing in with his big new contract at mid March. There's definitely going to be some resentment there. That's not how you build a clubhouse. But the one guy who's succeeding out of this group that signed late is Cody Bellinger. He was already built the repertoire with that team. He was there last year. He was there all last year. So I think if Cody had changed teams, we might have seen something similar to this. But because he's on that team already, his leadership is intact. All they wanted was him back, and they got that, and it's very clearly working. He's been really good this year so far. He's not going to be in our other best, I think, free agents, but yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear that the Boris effect really hindered these three.
Yeah, and you mentioned with Cody, like I think he signed a lot earlier than these other guys too. Even
Mm-hmm.
though it was still late, like it was right after. It was like the first week of spring training that he signed. So, or maybe the second week. So he did have more of a build up because most of these guys don't even play the first couple weeks anyways. They might play like 1 or 2 games, but I think that probably has part of it too. But we'll
Yeah,
see. We'll see how these turn out. But it's not looking good right now.
maybe a less fair bad free agent pickup that I want to throw in is that of Robert Stevenson. The Angels signed him to a 3-year deal. He's going to spend most of the first 2 years of that deal recovering from an elbow injury sustained in spring training. And Robert Stevenson was a guy I was extremely high on. And this is not a bad process by the Angels. Thought going after Robert Stevenson was a good move this offseason, but yeah, immediately getting hurt and not even throwing a pitch for your new team in the major league level is it's not going to end up being a good free agent signing.
Yeah, I mean it sucks. We've seen this a few times in recent years with relievers. I think Kirby Yates, when he signed with the Blue Jays, this
Yeah.
happened where he didn't even pitch for them. But I think that was just a 1 year deal. It's really a bummer with that being on a 3 year deal. But it's part of it. I mean, if you're going to sign free agents, if you're going to sign pitchers to multi-year deals, whether it's an extension or I mean, it's going to happen at times. You're going to end up getting a guy who ends up getting injured because pitchers get injured a lot. So I mean, I don't think it's bad process by the Angels. I didn't really even
No.
want to talk about it as a bad free agent pickup just because like there's really unless he had a horrible physical and the Angels just ignored it or something, like, which I mean you never put anything like that past the Angels, but um it's just that it's not bad process to me, but I agree. Like, it sucks to get stuck with a 3 year deal for a guy who's probably not going to pitch for at least a year and a half of it, and with it being a reliever who throws hard, and when he comes back from Tommy John, is he still going to be the same guy too? I mean, you worry about that every
Mhm.
time, so it's like you might have a year and a half of not good. So um, anyways, we'll see what happens. I hate it for him, and I hate it for the Angels because I mean, they spent money, and they are not getting rewarded for it. That kind of sucks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very yeah, like I said, I'm a supporter of Robert Stevenson. This stinks, but it does result in what is effectively dead money for the Angels, and it's not. It's just going to go down as a rough signing because of the injury, and it's a different reason I think than the Boris guys. So let's get back to the positive, I think, and we'll start with maybe the medium free agent signings, guys that were better than maybe expected. The Cardinals have actually been terrible, but they've gotten really good performances from their two free agent pickups that weren't like headliners in Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson. Both of them have ERAs in the threes, like three, I think 3.6 for Gibson, 3.8 for Lynn. Um, and Lynn's home run issues, what we saw in the playoffs with the Dodgers, those really have kind of come back a little bit, back to earth. So, so far, the issue for the Cardinals has not been the starting pitching. Those guys have been pretty good.
Yeah, it's been interesting that Lance Lynn has pitched to a 3.79 ERA so far this year, which is solid. Kyle Gibson, I believe a 3.67 ERA. There's a few things with these guys, like Kyle Gibson isn't striking many guys out. I think the metrics are kind of split on how good he's going to continue to be. He's got a low fours FIP. Lance Lynn's kind of the same way. His strikeout rate's down a bit. His walk rate's up a little bit, but um, he's not getting barreled quite as easy. I think his ground ball rate's gotten better this year, which is nice to see. So definitely, these guys they're doing what they were brought in to do, which is be like 4 and 5 starters and be veterans and eat innings and not be and not play themselves out of games. I mean, they weren't paid to come in as aces or anything. They're brought in as guys who are gonna just be fine. So and they've been just that. I mean, they've been effective enough. So that I think that's been good process by the Cardinals. I mean, everyone made fun of them for signing Lance Lynn, but I mean, Lance Lynn did not have a great year last year, and there's a lot of problems with his game now. He's old. He's 37, but you didn't. It would have been hard for him to give up. I mean, his home run rate last year was like historically bad, and that's not going to happen every year. Like that home run rate was crazy. Even even though he's going to give up a lot of home runs regardless, like that was there was some bad luck involved in that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that run, I mean, that's what he's going to be known for, I think, for the Dodgers fans. But yeah, he hasn't been so bad. And Kyle Gibson was a guy I had identified as a good potential sleeper target. That guy has a really very very Statcast friendly sweeper, and it looks like the Cardinals have toned down his fastball usage a little bit, toned up the sweeper usage just a tad, and that's resulting in a few more outs. I think he's also throwing his changeup more right now, and yeah, just a better pitch mix I think right now is definitely helping Kyle Gibson. So he's I think going to be one of the bargains of this past free agent offseason. And I think next year when he signs another one of those 1 year, $10 million deals, he's a type of guy who's going to end up getting some decent results because he's got that nasty wipeout pitch. So good for Kyle Gibson. Let's continue on with some of these good free agent pickups. How about Jordan Hicks? We talked about all the Giants' bad free agent signings, or ones like Jung-Hoo Lee that just are now resulting in injury. That makes him a lot scarier. Jordan Hicks has transitioned really nicely from reliever to starter in a way that I certainly did not think was possible. I think I've gone over whether or not it was any good. Um, and yeah, it's he's certainly been rock solid so far for the Giants.
Yeah, he has. Jordan Hicks is a guy that he was famous for throwing like 104-mile-an-hour sinkers as a young bullpen arm for the Cardinals, and then the Cardinals kind of tried to change him into a starter. Um, or they at least 2022 he started 8 games. They thought about doing that, and it didn't really go that well. And I think that it's it's interesting that there's going to be another guy we talk about that they're doing the same thing with, but like it's interesting these guys who are flamethrowers out of the bullpen, that teams are kind of identifying that as a market inefficiency, where like you can go take a guy who's like throwing 101 miles an hour in the bullpen and bring him out and maybe throw 96 if they've got good movement on their fastball and stuff, and then ramp it up when they need to, and be able to sustain it over a longer period of time, and maybe be durable as well. So Jordan Hicks has the skill of that pitch has while the velocity is a little bit lower pitching out of the pen. He's got so much movement on it. He's getting a ton of ground balls, and he's been very good for the Giants. I mean, we can say what we want to about the Giants, that their infield defense with Chapman over at third, even though we just talked about how bad he'd been at the plate. Well, he's an elite third base defender, and then and then shortstop, you got Nick Ahmed, who um, is not good, but he's a good defender. He has been for a long time. Like, you've got pretty good infield defense. Tyro Estrada, I believe, is a pretty good defensive player too. So, if you get the ball on the ground a lot, that's good. That's good process. And I think Jordan Hicks is signed for a few years, right? I don't think it's not a 1 year deal. So, um, if he's able to continue to stay durable with this, then he
Hmm.
could be a definite bargain for them.
Yeah, he absolutely can be. I definitely have to eat crow, man. I was wrong. I really
Yeah.
thought he would struggle. The other weirdly, and we'll go into the game that's happening right now. The other weirdly effective move that happened this offseason for a reliever converted into a starter was Reynaldo Lopez, and man, he has been unbelievable.
Yeah, Ronaldo Lopez is another one that's just like we're talking about Jordan Hicks, and the difference with Ronaldo Lopez is that he was a top 50 prospect when he came up, and he did start for 2 seasons with the White Sox. He threw 188 innings in 2018,
Hmm.
184 innings in 2019, and while it wasn't great, it wasn't a total entire disaster, especially in 2018. He had a 3.91 ERA. The metrics didn't really back that up too well, and then he regressed in 19. But the White Sox moved into the bullpen. He was a starter in 2020 and 2021 as well. He just didn't throw as many innings. And the White Sox moved into the bullpen. 2022 and 2023, he was very, very good out of the bullpen. So he pitched to a 2.76 ERA in 2022 and a 3.27 ERA in 2023, and he got traded midseason in 2023. So,
Hmm.
he had a lot of success out of the bullpen, and the Braves brought him in, and he's another of these guys. He was throwing. He wasn't quite as hard of a thrower as Jordan Hicks was, but he was throwing in the upper 90s as a reliever and touching 100. And now he's throwing 93, 94, and then you'll suddenly see him throw 97 for a batter or for a pitch when he needs a strikeout or something. Like we saw it tonight. I think he hit 98 tonight. So um, I think that could be a really effective way to pitch, and the Braves have figured it out. He's developed a couple of his off speed pitches. He kind of ditched when he went to the bullpen. He just went fastball slider. He's kind of flipped a couple of those pitches now, where he's throwing his curveball a lot more this year. It's been really good. He's throwing his changeup a little bit. It hadn't been quite as effective, but it's been a great signing for the Braves. They got him 3 years, $30 million.
Hmm.
So, like, if
That's
he's
yeah.
able to start and then he's not going to keep up a 1.53 ERA, but if he's able to start and have a ERA in the mid threes for 3 years and $30 million, that is an incredible deal. Just like Jordan Hicks deal would be if he's able to do the same. So, I definitely think that this has been a fantastic one of the better signings of the offseason so far.
Yeah, 134 ERA is what it's down to for Reynaldo Lopez
Yeah,
as
after
we
tonight.
talk.
Yep.
He's been really really quite good, and he's just really done a good job of limiting damage. As a pitcher right now, and that's really all you can ask for. Um, another guy who's limited damage is going to be the MLB ERA leader, who was signed as a free agent last offseason on a complicated swell opt deal, where I think the max the Cubs are going to be on the hook for is like 50 million for Shota Imanaga, and I think they'd be happy that they'd pay the swell opt that I think gets up to 80 million at this point. Like Shota Imanaga after tonight's ERA is under 1 after 5 shutout innings against the Braves' very good offense. He's just really nasty. He's got a really good splitter from the left side, and there's not a whole lot of guys who have that left-handed splitter. He's got a rising fastball that tends to just kind of sneak up on hitters. He's got that hitch in his delivery that makes things a little bit deceptive. And Shota Imanaga's really been fantastic to start this season.
Yeah, he has. And I mean, this is a guy that I was skeptical of coming over. I mean, you see guys come over from the from Korea or in Japan and struggle in their first year, especially. But he's not a super hard thrower. He's 30 years old, and I thought the contract that he signed was definitely fair for the Cubs. Like I thought the Cubs could be potentially getting a bargain, although I wasn't a huge fan of Imanaga, in general. Like people talking about him getting 100 million, in the off season, and I didn't think that he was going to be worth that. Like I thought that could have been a bad contract, but turns out 100 million would have been a bargain for what he's done so far, and he's been awesome. And I do think when the weather heats up a little bit and guys start to adjust to him, I think there's going to be he's going to give up a little bit more home runs. He hadn't given up many home runs at all, but even if he does, like he's got a 237 FIP. Even if his home run rate goes up some, like he's still going to be like you know, an elite option. Honestly, I mean, he's been awesome. So, good for the Cubs on identifying that. They really needed, another good starting pitcher this year, and I was really down on their rotation because I didn't know that Steele was gonna repeat what he did last year. Of course, he's been hurt, and I didn't
Hmm.
think that. And obviously Hendricks, I think, kind of rebounded last year, but I really didn't think he was
Yep.
gonna do that again. And of course, he hasn't. And but Tayon being better than he was last year, and then Imanaga coming in has really saved this rotation. It's been cool to see. Cool to see him have success. He seems like a fun character in the clubhouse and stuff too, which is always good to have. So definitely, that was definitely one of the better signings. That I don't know exactly what the situation is with his contract because it's so weird. It's like got like all these opt-ins and opt-outs and team opt-ins and team opt-outs. It's like I'm just gonna sit here and say that it's a good deal regardless of what happens with the opt-ins and opt-outs.
Yeah, it's once it all gets sorted out, I think Shodi Managa's contract is going to be a bargain, and it fits right into this bit of best free agent pickups. I mean, the Cubs desperately needed an ace starting pitcher, I think, and we talked about them trading for one, and all these other things, but it turns out the best option was to sign this guy from Japan so far, and hopefully he's able to maintain and keep with good starts. I'm not certainly not expecting a sub 1 ERA all season, right? But he's been impressive, all right, and his stuff has been really good, and hopefully he's able to maintain that going forward. One final kind of, I guess, pitcher, and then we'll hit the one free agent hitter and move on. Is Eric Fed for the White Sox has been really really strong. I think he's going to end up being a bargain for as a trade piece for the contender for a contender at the deadline.
Yeah, he is. I liked this signing in the offseason. Eric Fetty's a guy. I think it's Fed. I don't know how to say his name.
It's one of the
It,
two. It's
it's
Fetty
one
or
of the two.
Fed.
It's Fed or Fetty. I don't know, but we probably should learn how to pronounce it because he's been good. And this is a guy that he was a top prospect. Came up with the Nationals. Was a back end starter. He was just kind of meh. Um, not great, but he is a guy that he's one of these guys that went overseas and he developed a couple of new pitches. He's thrown a sweeper now and he's come back and he's been really good. Um, and it's been it's been fun to see, and I love this signing because he performed so well. I think he was in the KBO last year, but he performed so well there that and with that added to the fact that he made brought in some new pitches and stuff. It was I really liked it, and he's been good so far. A 3 ERA. Um, he's got in 8 starts, 45 innings. He's been durable. He's always been pretty durable. Considering like going back and forth with the bullpen and stuff. Like he's a solid. I think he's a solid option for a contender to trade for at the deadline if they need like a back end starter. And I believe he has a super cheap option next year too, if I'm not mistaken. So this was a
Hmm.
great signing for the White Sox. And if Fetty keeps up what he's done so far, then he will be able to probably get a really solid prospect back in the off season or at the trade deadline because I mean if he's that cheap considering what other 5 starters were getting paid, that's going to be a really good deal to get. So very good on the White Sox for bringing him in, and good on Fetty for going and doing something. He's not just like slugging through the minor leagues and stuff. He was proactive about going to overseas and learning a new pitch and you know redeveloping himself. So very cool for him.
Yes, absolutely. I think some team will be very excited when the White Sox finally pull the plug on this one and start selling pieces off. He's going to be very, very much a, I think he might even have a chance to pitch in the playoffs with the way he's been going and with the way the White Sox are absolutely going to be selling. So the other one I'm excited to talk about is Teoscar Hernandez, signed with the Dodgers. Obviously, 1 year deal, big AAV. We thought Teoscar might get a 2 or 3 year deal somewhere else for maybe 15 million, but he signed for 23 to play this season, and he fits exactly what the Dodgers needed. He's slugged 11 homers. The strikeout rate's a little bit down. It's very clear that he wanted out of Seattle and has gotten there. And has been very, very effective to this point. So good for Teoscar Hernandez, but this one I could see from a mile away because at some point you got to pitch to somebody in that lineup. Somebody was going to feast. I always felt like Teoscar had another gear, and it's good to see him getting there.
Yeah, definitely. Teoscar Hernandez has been really solid so far. Um, he's a guy that the last year the chase just got out of control with him. He was really really rough. With the strikeout rate, 31% strikeout rate last year, only a 4% walk rate. Like the
Hmm.
plate discipline was a mess. And he's always been a guy that hits the ball extremely hard. And I think that there is something to him getting into that lineup with those top four guys, and kind of being the fifth guy in that lineup. Teams don't want to throw to him, or teams have to throw to him. They can't avoid him and throw. If they throw pitches off the plate, they're gonna they're he if you walk him, like you're scared to walk him even though he doesn't walk much. And
Hmm.
that's one thing that I do think is a little bit concerning for him going forward this year, is that he is chasing a lot still. So I think it's a little bit concerning. He's 8% walk rate's way up though. Last year was 5%. I was looking at the wrong number, but
Yep.
anyways, he's a it's I don't know if he's going to be able to keep this up all year, but like he's hits the ball hard, he hits home runs, and to be the fifth guy in that lineup is awesome. The biggest thing to me though with Teoscar Hernandez is this is a guy who's been basically a DH for his career. Like he has been a negative defender. He's been bad at that. He's been playing DH most of the time. Like last year he played right field a decent amount, but he was really rough out there last year. You know, he's not this year though has been like miles better. He's actually been a positive defensive player this year, value wise, which is awesome. So that's been the biggest part of this, where like his WAR has always been kept down really low because of that, and this year it's been,
Hmm.
it's been way, 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 way better. So good on good on Teoscar Hernandez for working on that defense, and and also being good in that lineup. I mean, he could not come in here at DH. I mean, Shohei's the DH, so
Yep.
he had to figure it out, and he did, and that's been good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's finish this episode off with just a couple of small notes that maybe we can get into a teensy bit of depth on. So MLB has signed the Roku deal, where Roku will be the home for MLB Sunday Leadoff, and all Roku games will be available on MLB.TV with no paywall. I think that second part is the biggest, noteworthy piece of this TV deal. Roku, obviously, I think is like the Amazon one. It might not be that. It might be its own thing, but
It's its own thing.
yeah, their own. Roku's got the games, but the games will be available, so you don't have to go buy an entire another streaming service in order to watch your MLB games.
Yeah, and that's been a pet peeve of mine for a few years now. Is those Peacock and Apple TV Plus and all these, like if you add every single one of them up, you're going to end up paying like $500 to watch your team play. So, it's pretty ridiculous the amount of money that it is cost to just watch your team play on TV. So it's good on MLB for having this as a free game. I still don't like that the games are so early. I mean, it's 11:30 Eastern time. So, I mean, what if a West Coast team plays? Like it's, most people. I mean, I don't mind morning games, but most people at 8:30 in the morning baseball game is crazy. Um, Obviously, they probably wouldn't schedule teams to play at a West Coast site, but like if the Mariners are traveling to play in New York, like the Mariners fans gonna have to watch the game. It's gonna be 8:30 on Sunday morning that they're watching the game. It's like you're just not. It's just not gonna work that well. But I think that this is it's good for MLB, and I want to add one other thing. MLB needs a lot more nationally televised games. They need to have like more than one game a week on ESPN, and they need to have a couple more games a week on FS1. Like they need more than just one big televised game a week, and they need to market it better. And they also have some TBS games, but they really need to market it better and make sure they've got a game on national TV, every night for the entire week. So, because I think that especially with all these teams going to probably in the future going to be all on kind of their own streaming services and stuff. Um, you're gonna have to market the game somehow,
Yeah.
and having more nationally televised games is how you're gonna do it. So I definitely think that that's a big deal, but I think this is a pretty good deal, except for the start times.
Yeah, sometimes they're a little bit wonky, but yeah, I'm with you on MLB needing to find a way to still broadcast the games without requiring all fans to be subscribed to a specific service. I think there's certainly something a little bit wrong, I think, with all of this. And, it's kind of the way things have been trending. But yeah, I think back to the reason I even became a Cubs fan in the first place was because WGN was a cable televised, service. And so you could get that anywhere in the country. And so oftentimes, you'll find Cubs fans anywhere because there was always Cubs games on because it was cable broadcasted. Well, with this downfall of cable, there needs to be more immediacy to providing games, and MLB has not grown with the times, right? Because these teams have their own um, services. It makes things very exclusive, and it's preventing people from watching the games versus enabling people to watch the games. I mean, I don't even have marquee right now. I haven't been able to watch the Cubs all season. It's ticking me off. um, I watch what I can on Twitter and whatnot, but it's very disappointing, and it's just tough when you don't always have access to the games, because before it was as simple as flipping on your TV, turning the antenna the right way, and going. And now it's not quite so simple.
Yeah, for sure.
So with that, let's finish this episode off with a Statcast update, right? So Statcast has officially announced that they have bat speed, and bat it's a very much a contact oriented leaderboard. This leaderboard kind of tells the story of uh, how quickly the batter is swinging on the leaderboard. Currently, the leader is like Giancarlo Stanton, right? Which is kind of not a big surprise to anybody who's watched baseball over the last 6 or 7 years. Stanton is one of those guys who generates a ton of power and a ton of whiff with his swinging. But there's a couple of outliers on this very interesting graphic, and I thought maybe Matt and I could just go over some of the more interesting things that are like kind of surprising us and standing out to us. But uh, yeah, so Matt, take away the Statcast leaderboard update.
Yeah, so I thought this was a really cool update, and this Statcast bat tracking stuff with the average bat speed and the squared up percentages and all that is it's something that I think is really really cool, and it's really interesting data to look at now. And I don't think it totally correlates to player success, but it can tell you some things about players too.
Mhm.
So one of the interesting things is that own brand, the the lowest average bat speed in baseball is Luis Arias, and it's not even close. He's lower by
Mhm.
2 miles an hour than the next guy, which is, I believe, Stephen Kwan, which makes
Yep.
sense too. So,
Yep.
the guys that swing really that don't swing super hard, but these guys square up the ball though. They're both top five in squared up rate. And then you've also got Mookie Betts in that too, where his bat speed's not that good, but his squared up percentage is really good. The crazy thing is that Juan Soto is the other guy in the top five in
Mhm.
the squared up percentage, but his bat speed is top 10. So that's pretty remarkable. And that is something that correlates. Like these guys who are squaring it up a lot and have a high average bat speed. Juan Soto is having an awesome year. William Contreras, Shohei Ohtani, Alec Boehm, who's had a really good year so far. Yandy Diaz, Ketel Marte, Salvador Perez. Like these guys have been really good so far. And then you've got the guys who just have really good, really good bat speed in general. Giancarlo Stanton, he doesn't square it up that well, but he's having a good. He's hitting for a lot of power still. Like you knew he was going to be up there. Um, you've got some of these guys like it's definitely been interesting. An interesting thing to look at. The other thing too, it does show the trend of if you swing hard, you're not squaring it up as often. If you don't swing hard, you're squaring it up really often, and it's something that hasn't really been quantified
Hmm.
by anything so far. And this is something that kind of quantifies that. So I think that's the big trend. It's fun to see some of these outliers and stuff, but I think that's the big trend to look at when when it comes to this leaderboard. Is that there's that linear relationship is there for sure.
It's a fun little bit, and one of the biggest fun pieces of baseball is statistical analysis and being able to take a look at some of this stuff and quantify it and say what come to a conclusion about it. Does this bat tracking stuff tell us anything off the rip with just, I think, 120, 150 plate appearances to this point? I would guess no, right? Like, I don't think this is kind of, if you're bad right now, you can certainly improve this. I don't know that with this small of a sample, we have a quite accurate measurement, but it does tell me a lot that guys like Luis Arias and Stephen Kwan are in kind of an outlier group on this chart. Justin Turner is here as well. Turner's off to another crazy start. He's like 40 years old. I don't know when he's going to stop doing just 300 batting average, 120 WRC plus. He's done it every year for 10 years
Yep.
now. Um, it's and he's not swinging hard clearly, but he's making a lot of contact, and that's and a lot of good squared up contact, and that seems to be a way to get success out of your bat. You've got a lot of contact guys on this graph. You can see the power guys on this graph and how hard they're hitting the ball, and it really is creating a good juxtaposition of how to analyze baseball, because we talked about Luis Arias and Stephen Kwan a good bit on this podcast, where those are guys who are star level players, but they do it a different way, right? And to be able to quantify that those guys are clearly doing something different at the plate. When you look at just exit velocity and like launch angle, you're seeing a guy who hits the ball on the ground a lot. But what this is showing is that those guys are clearly in more control of their barrel than other players, and their contact levels are more sustainable. And I think for me, that's the coolest thing that this is showing, is that those guys are probably sustainable in terms of contact hitters. But then I also look over here at Juan Soto, like you said. Juan Soto is a tier above, right? He's like a contact hitter that also swings for the big power. That guy is just another level because he's out on an island by himself, and that's kind of the fun of these statistical profiles. If you ever watched a John Boyce video, he'll have those charts that show the guy he's talking about way off in the corner by himself. Well, those are the guys I wanted to talk about today. From this table that pops up when you go click on bat tracking on Statcast.
Yeah, and what one last cool thing about this whole squared up bat speed thing, this data, is that when you're going to be able to tell a change in a player's approach. Like if a player comes into spring training says, "Yeah, I'm changing my two strike approach this year," that's something that you're going to be able to quantify a lot better and see if they're actually changing it. So I think that's a really cool
Hmm.
thing to be able to see too, is like how guys have changed their approach throughout the season, and as you can sort it by the count that they're in, a two strike count, and see who swings the hardest then, and and over the next 3 or 4 years, you're going to be able to see trends of
Hmm.
this guy started swinging softer over, so it's brand new, so we don't have all those trends yet, but in the same way that we've seen trends from barrel rate and exit velocity and all this stuff, you're going to be able to see it from your bat speed stuff over the next couple of years. I think it's just going to be really interesting to look at.
Yeah, it's going to be nice, and with all this public data coming forward, we're starting to get an understanding of how baseball players operate, and guys like Luis Arias are able to. Why is Luis Arias' swing so geared towards contact? Well, he's got such control over that barrel that he's able to square that ball up no matter what. And he's not sacrificing on power to do it, because he's able to get you know enough exit velocity on there to be the top guy that squares up the ball. So, it's a fun little chart, fun little analysis. It's on Statcast. All you have to do is from go click on the leaderboards and then go click on bat tracking, and that's how you get to this. But a fun little note to end this episode of the Batflip podcast. Matt, I know you did mention that you wanted to talk about the player of the week. Who's your player of the week? Go quick.
Yeah, well, I'll just quickly say that this is the one week of the year that Eddie Rosario decides to be the best player on the planet for a random week of the season, and it's been this week. That's all I had. I
Yep.
I, I wanted to mention I looked up the last 7 days of baseball, and Eddie Rosario has a 354 WRC plus over the last seven
Oh my
days.
goodness.
So I just knew I had to mention it, even if we weren't going to do a full players of the week segment, because he does this every year where it's like he has like 2 weeks out of the season that he's just unconscious, and then the rest of the season he's below average. He's actually been really bad this year, but till this week, so it's interesting to
I
see.
I I didn't even know he was playing for Washington. That's
Yep.
how
Oh,
well up to date I was on with
oh,
Eddie Rosario.
guess what position he's playing?
DH.
No,
Oh well.
he's playing center.
Oh my god.
Or he
All
has
right.
been. He started. I know
Interesting.
he's. I don't know how much he's played center lately, but he started the season in center field for them, which is remarkable. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
he's played 74 innings in center field this year. He's played more in right field and left field, but still, like he's playing center as much as he's playing right and left, which is crazy.
that's awesome, and good for Eddie Rosario. I think he's
Yeah,
what 2021 Braves World Series legend, right? So
or NLCS. We can talk.
NLCS legend.
Let's.
Yep.
We definitely need to throw that out there because it was against the Dodgers. So, and
A good
Damien's not
point. Yep.
here.
Speaking of the Dodgers, I got you Darvish as my player of the week. Then
Okay,
I'll
well
throw
there you
him
go.
in.
He threw a good
Two
start.
solid starts, zero runs allowed, and anytime I get to talk about you Darvish, I will gladly do so.
Yep.
He is one of the best dudes in baseball. He is one of the best pitchers in baseball. I sincerely hope he doesn't ever lose effectiveness. And these last two games he started, he's been rock solid. 12 innings pitched, 0 ERA. Looks like 12 strikeouts, right? So strikeout per inning,
Very good.
looking good. I'm glad for that. Good for you, Darvish. He's always going to be one of my favorite pitchers and one of my favorite Major League Baseball players. So with that, I think we are done with this episode of the Batflip Podcast. Catch us on Twitter at Batflip Podcast and all your podcasting websites. Hopefully you're able to find it okay, and we'll catch you guys next time.